The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Bringing Native Ads into Focus. I'm Jen Flanagan, the Vice President of Marketing for AdTaxi. I joined AdTaxi over 4 years ago and was brought on initially to build out our native advertising solution, which is what runs across our owned and operated newspaper sites. Prior to that, I worked for Say Media and Six Apart and worked in partnership with Federated Media, all of whom are considered pioneers of native advertising, although at that time we called it conversational marketing. I live in Minneapolis with my husband and 4-year-old daughter and love traveling, skiing, hiking, really anything outdoors, and love checking out new restaurants. In today's session, we'll talk through the history of content marketing and native advertising to provide some context for how we got to where we are today and why it's so valuable. We'll next dive into the different types of native advertising and when and how best to utilize them to round out your digital marketing campaigns. Next, we'll share some best practices and thought starters for your content strategy. And finally, we'll wrap up by talking through how to measure your native campaign's effectiveness, along with a couple of case studies. We've incorporated some trivia throughout the session, so when those come up, there will be a poll box that pops up. You can put your answers into that poll box before we show the answers. And of course, we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for questions. But if you have questions that come up throughout the session, feel free to put those into the questions box and we will address those at the end. So before diving into the history of content marketing, let's start out with our first question. How much will content marketers spend on content marketing in the year 2019? So you can go ahead and place, it looks like there could be some delay right now. Hold on, it sounds like we are potentially experiencing a little delay. Okay. All right, so we will move forward. See that? So the answer is 300 billion. According to marketingmag.com, content marketers will be spending roughly 300 billion by 2019, which means that it will more than double in under 4 years. So what that means, really the key takeaway there, is that content is core to every marketer's strategy and will continue to be so for a long time to come. So what is content marketing? Content marketing is any marketing format that involves the creation and sharing of media and publishing content in order to acquire customers. It is focused not on selling, but on communicating with and helping customers and prospects. Remember this last sentence, as we'll come back to this a few times throughout today's session. This is really the key to content marketing and native advertising. So what is native advertising? Native advertising allows for the distribution of your brand content across other environments in order to attract a new audience. The key is that this type of paid media fits the natural form and function of the experience within which it lives. So let's dive into how we got to where we are today. The first instances of content marketing were in the late 1800s. The Furrow is a customer magazine published by John Deere since 1895. It focused on how customers could use technology to make their work easier and run their businesses better. This is still in publication today and includes a digital component. In 1900, Michelin Tires released a 400-page guide geared at helping drivers maintain their cars. It covered basic maintenance, accommodations, and other travel tips. After 35,000 copies were distributed for free, the company began selling the books for a profit. In 1904, the Jell-O Corporation began distributing free copies of its own cookbook that suggested creative and useful ways to use its own product. Before this time, Jell-O was basically unknown and unused. After just 2 years of content marketing, the company saw its sales rise to over $1 million per year, which of course at that time was a lot of money. One of the earliest examples of a true native advertising approach was by De Beers. In the 1930s, few Americans proposed with a diamond ring. Amid the ravages of the Depression in 1938, De Beers hired a New York City-based ad agency to change that. This agency gave Hollywood actresses use of their diamonds to be showcased in romantic films or at events. They offered up those stories and photographs to selected magazines and newspapers to show celebrities wearing them and reinforce the link between diamonds and romance. Over the next 4 decades, De Beers saw their U.S. diamond sales skyrocket from 23 million to over 2.1 billion. Anyone know how soap operas got their name? Well, they started out on radio in the 1930s and then moved to TV around the 50s. And a large number of them, including The Guiding Light, Another World, The Young and the Restless, just to name a few, were produced by consumer packaged goods company P&G, and specifically Spick and Span, Ivory Soap, Oxydol Laundry Soap, and more. Hence the term soap opera. There are a whole host of additional examples of content marketing or native advertising over the years, but they generally remained a component of larger companies' marketing programs that had significant dollars to put toward it. With the dawn of the internet, everyone was able to get into the business of publishing content. Bill Gates wrote in his famous Content is King essay from 1996, one of the exciting things about the internet is that anyone with a PC and a modem can publish whatever content they can create. And while this was true, it didn't mean that people could find that content. The Field of Dreams quote, "If you build it, they will come," does not necessarily apply to internet content. Social media changed the game. Social media provided a vehicle for brands to build direct access to audiences. Contests and inane organic Facebook posts may have driven likes, retweets, followers, and comments at first, but what did those interactions actually mean? They didn't necessarily translate to new business or brand loyalty, as consumers learned over time to ignore them. Brands soon learned that they needed to share relevant, interesting information, good stories, to grab and hold attention of their audience. BuzzFeed, Upworthy, and Forbes are some of the earliest media publishers to offer native advertising or sponsored content. They worked with brands to develop content written in the publisher's own voice that they knew would resonate with their audience. They thought about native not solely as a new or unique ad format, but as a means to more authentically connect a brand with their audience. It required a certain level of sensibility to produce, one that ensured the content is contextually relevant, resonates with the publisher's audience, and is on brand for the advertiser. 2011, the year the term native advertising was coined by Seth Godin at the OMA conference was also the year that sponsored posts launched on Facebook. This was the dawn of a whole new world in native advertising. While sponsored posts on individual media giants like BuzzFeed had the potential to reach a mass audience, Facebook changed the game yet again. This allowed brands to not only distribute their content to a mass audience, but they could also target their content to a specific audience. This, along with the proliferation of mobile, with social media platforms being highly mobile, native ad dollars started to take off. In 2012, mobile accounted for only 14% of native ad revenue, and today accounts for more than 57%. Native was beginning to be such a force to be reckoned with ad revenues nearing $5 billion. The IAB finally took notice and released its native advertising playbook in 2013. Fast forward to today, where native ad revenue is projected to be over $20 billion in 2017, and here is where we are. Between technology vendors, agencies, and media companies forming internal branded content studios, the solutions landscape is being filled in on all sides. So we'll move on to our next question. Unfortunately, the polls box is not working. So if you want to put in your answers to the questions in the comments box or the questions box, then we can look at those there. So true or false, US native display ad revenue is greater than non-native display ad revenue. All right. So while native advertising has been getting a lot of attention in the past few years, this may come as a surprise to many of you. The native display portion of this includes both social native and publisher in-feed ads. It does not include sponsored content, and we'll talk through the differences of those in a little bit. But native advertising is expected to drive 74% of all display ad revenue by 2021. And to note here, non-native display includes standard IAB ad banners, rich media, and video ads. So there are, in broad terms, 6 different types of native advertising. And I would venture to say that many of you have probably utilized some form of native advertising, maybe without even knowing it. The first is native style display. This includes in-feed ads, in-article ads, native RTV. They're generally delivered on an impression basis, oftentimes using some of the same performance metrics as a traditional display ad. Next is sponsorship or sponsored content. This would be considered a true native approach, one that keeps a user within the publisher's website. BuzzFeed, Forbes, T-Brand Studio, out of the New York Times, these are all sponsorship-based programs. We'll get into both of these more in a little bit. Then we have Facebook, Twitter, and all of the other social platforms that now offer promoted posts, pins, tweets, you name it. These are the 3 that generally come to mind when thinking about native advertising. However, there are a few more that, when using a broad definition of native advertising, one in which the paid ad follows the natural form and function of the environment within which it lives, there are a few more we need to talk about. First is search ads. Now, some of you may say, that's ridiculous. However, if you think about it, you can only get a Google AdWords ad on a Google search engine results page, and it blends in with the rest of the organic listings on that page. Next is recommendation widgets. These did not traditionally conform to the look and feel of a publisher's website, but companies like Outbrain and Taboola, as well as others, have modified their format to do just that. And finally, promoted listings. Amazon, eBay, and other e-commerce sites don't want to be left out. Usually found on non-content-based sites, promoted listings are presented in identical fashion with the product or services on a given site. Just like with a search ad, these are considered native to the ad experience, or to the experience. But for our purposes today, we're going to focus our attention on the more narrow definition of native advertising, native style display, and native sponsorships, or sponsored content that tend to run on media publishers' websites. But if we think back and look across all of the 6 types of native advertising, you may have noticed that regardless of platform or format, they follow the look, feel, and function of the content of the publisher in which they appear. You can't get a Facebook sponsored post on BuzzFeed. And that right there is the primary difference between a native ad and a display ad. So on the right-hand side, you have a display ad. You're all familiar with display or banner ads. They come in predetermined sizes, 300 by 250, 728 by 90, 160 by 600, etc. And when you run a campaign either on one publisher site or across the exchanges, the creative looks the same across all of the environments. The placement is generally in the right rail, can be at the top or the bottom of the page, and it clicks out to the advertiser's website. On the left-hand side, you have 3 native examples, and all of these point to the same article. However, you'll notice that the look and feel of them are all different, down to the headline, branding, imagery, and size. That's because with native, you take the various creative assets and put them together to create the ad that fits the publisher's site. This is either done by an individual publisher based on their standardized or customized templates, or is done automatically and delivered programmatically across a vast number of publishers. You may also notice that the display ad's message is much more promotional, whereas the headlines of the article are much more educational in nature. So moving on to the next question. What is the fastest growing segment of native advertising? A, native style display, B, sponsorship, or C, social? You can put your answers into the questions box. So while social native makes up the largest piece of the pie, native display is the fastest growing segment and is expected to grow over 200% between 2016 and 2018. Sponsorship is also growing at a higher rate than social native right now and is expected to continue on this trajectory, but will likely still lag behind native display due to the nature of it being a little less scalable. So let's bring this to life. Meet Julie. She just registered for a marathon. She's doing research on training programs. In conducting her research, she lands on runnersworld.com. While looking through runnersworld.com, she comes across an article titled How to Utilize Music as a Training Tool for Your Runs. She clicks on the article because she wants to make sure that she isn't only preparing for the marathon, but having fun while doing so. While reading the article, she realizes that that it is a sponsored article and clicks through to Jaybird's website. She hadn't heard of Jaybird before, but was intrigued since the article really resonated with her. She learns that Jaybird is a maker of wireless headphones for runners. She peruses the website, looks through the blog, and continues on with her day. A couple of weeks into her training program, she's struggling with staying motivated and decides she needs to purchase some high-quality headphones so she can listen to music while she runs. At that point, she recalls Jaybird. She goes to their website, determines they will be a perfect fit, and makes a purchase. So this same scenario can occur with Julie clicking on the article on runnersworld.com, taking her directly to Jaybird's website. Okay, so we've talked about native style display and native sponsorships, and also 2 different ways those ads can function. Either they can keep the reader on the publisher's website, or they can click directly out to the advertiser's website. So how do you know when to use which type of native advertising, and what are the pros and cons of utilizing each of them? So let's start with native sponsorship. So the screenshot here is of the T-Brand studio with New York Times doing a program that was promoting Orange is the New Black show on Netflix. So this is a much more immersive native experience, really leveraged to engage with a publisher's audience. It mirrors the exact editorial experience for a seamless user experience, and it keeps that publisher or the user on the publisher's site. This is leveraged as a much more upper funnel tactic, and the goals are really to generate brand awareness or association with a particular topic. And it's really aimed at providing education or positioning a brand as a thought leader. It's highly custom and unique to the individual publisher, and it has a really, really high engagement rate on average. These generally can be more expensive as they tend to require more resources to produce and are generally priced on either a flat fee or a cost per engagement basis. Next is native style display, in which the goal is to engage the right user at the right time within the right context, similar to programmatic display. Some of the benefits of native style display is that it's a highly scalable solution, so you can run a program across thousands of sites if you choose. It tends to be more of a mid-funnel tactic, but could also still be an upper funnel tactic. Leverages some of the same targeting capabilities available with programmatic, so you can target based on category. Some cases you can target based on data targeting, geography, et cetera, and allows for same optimization as a programmatic campaign. It can drive users either to a brand site, and in some cases, you keep the user on the publisher site. And one of the key differences here is that you can also leverage conversion tracking. These can be a little bit more cost effective and are generally priced on a CPM or CPC basis. Remember, with either format you leverage, native advertising isn't directly about selling, but rather about communicating with and helping your prospects and customers. And focusing solely on the point of conversion ignores the journey. So marketers need a full funnel solution to assist in building the top of the funnel to feed the bottom of the funnel. And native is a solution that can do that. Native drives higher engagement, so you can leverage it as a prospecting tool or an influencer tool to build awareness, influence consumers, and drive engaged visitors to an advertiser's website. Then you can retarget those visitors via other channels to drive conversions. So remember Julie, who engaged with the native ad on runnersworld.com? We talked through two different scenarios, one in which she went directly to Jaybird's website from the native ad, and one in which she clicked through to the website after reading the article on runnersworld.com. In either scenario, utilizing this full funnel approach works. With most native advertising solutions, you're able to place a retargeting pixel on the article page on the publisher site and or on the landing page of your website. So if a marketer was using this approach, then it's more likely than not that after Julie engaged with the Jaybird ad, she was retargeted in some fashion over the next couple of weeks, either with display or social ads. And it was a combination of those ads and engagements that drove her to then possibly conduct a Google search, which brought up Jaybird's search ad, driving her to their website to convert and make the purchase. So the goal of this cross-channel full funnel solution is to assist in moving Julie along in her purchasing decision. Native may or may not have been her first interaction with the brand, and it may or may not have been her only interaction with the brand. Each channel serves a purpose in engaging with consumers at each stage of their purchasing decision. And native is simply another ad format to engage with consumers, providing a means to tell a story and do so in a deeper, more engaging fashion, one that can oftentimes provide more value to the consumer. So the next question, fact or fiction? Consumers don't want or like native advertising. And go ahead and put your answers in the questions box. Alrighty. Fiction. So in his rant against native advertising, John Oliver in 2014 said, ads are baked into content like chocolate chips into a cookie, except it's actually more like raisins into a cookie because nobody wants them there. Well, it turns out readers actually expect to find a few raisins in their cookies, and some even like them. Research has shown that 86% of viewers feel that online advertising is necessary to receive free content online. Additionally, 60% of consumers are more open to online ads that tell a story than ones that simply sell a product. So Julie's experience was an ideal example of what all native advertisers want to have happen. And it worked because the goal was to engage her through a story. And while this same scenario isn't a guarantee, there are a ton of statistics that show just how valuable native advertising is. First off, native ads are more appealing and less intrusive than other ad formats. They generate higher engagement, i.e. clicks, than traditional display banners. And consumers actually look at them more frequently because of the placement of the native ads. And they're more willing to share them with their friends. And we all know the power of word of mouth. Statistics show that 77% of consumers are more willing to purchase a product or service when they've learned about it from a friend or family member. In addition, they also register an 18% higher lift in purchase intent than other banner ads. So yeah, these are all great stats about the impact of native, but how do you ensure success with your native advertising program? My primary recommendation is to make it valuable and meaningful to the consumer. Beyond that, here are a few best practices you can use to make sure your native campaigns are set up correctly, engage with the right audience, and perform effectively. So first, think about this in the broader scope of your marketing plan. How does it fit in, and how can you be sure to tell a consistent story across devices and channels? Select the right creative. Make sure that those creative assets that you're putting together drive to an appropriate landing page. So whether it is a mixture of whether you're using native style display or doing a sponsorship, and whether the landing page is on the publisher's website or the brand's website, you need to make sure that you're driving to the right landing page and it's within context. Set realistic goals. So make sure that you're setting realistic expectations up front before you start, and identify a reporting plan so that you can check in regularly to see how your campaign is performing. Think like a publisher. So think about what is going to provide value to the reader. And then finally, you need to continue to measure and optimize to make sure that you're driving performance. And through this, you can also uncover some key audience insights. So this may feel a bit overwhelming to some of you, and to others it may be old hat. Wherever you're at, I've always found it helpful to have some thought starters to kickstart some brainstorming and get you thinking of how you might approach this for your own business. Here are a variety of topics we've come up with for various business categories. You may notice that they're all winter related. 'Tis the season, I guess. So for automotive, the ultimate commuter's holiday playlist. Or for healthcare, tips for making and sticking to your New Year's resolutions. For insurance or financial, winter travel insurance tips to ensure a safecation. Recruitment, 10 tips to make your resume stand out amongst the competition. Or I like this one, it's time to love Mondays, how to know when to start looking for a new job. So now you know what types of native advertising are out there, how to leverage them, and how to ensure success. But how do you track or measure the success of native advertising? The specifics will depend on your overall goals for your native program, the type of execution you leverage, etc. However, in most cases, you'll want to look at page views, time spent, social shares, conversions, demographics of those engaging with your content, and if you can afford it, brand lift via brand lift studies. One thing to keep in mind is to not place too much focus on page views, though, but rather I like to focus more on the engagement style metrics, or what happens after that initial engagement. Similar to display, at AdTaxi, we think of page views as vanity metrics, just like clicks, and we like to focus more on the metrics that matter. If you focus solely on page views, you may be ignoring the quality of the visitors to that page. For example, if you end up with 10,000 page views, but time spent is an average of 5 to 10 seconds, and there's no real meaningful additional actions taken, what value did you get from that? On the other hand, if you end up with 500 page views, with time spent around 60 to 90 seconds, social shares, additional website page visits, then you've connected with the right audience, a more engaged audience, albeit a smaller one, but one that is more likely to convert in the long run. So before we wrap up, I'd like to share a couple of case studies from 2 campaigns we've run at AdTaxi. The first is an example of an automotive dealer who utilized a native style display format via native RTB and leveraged AdTaxi's Magellan optimization platform to enhance the results. The advertiser was looking to drive conversions, primarily vehicle description page views, but also location page visits, and others. We utilized Magellan for native to increase the total conversions and decreased the cost per acquisition over time. Over a 3-month period, we saw the client CPA go from $1.89 to 53 cents, and the total number of conversions increase 155% from 473 in month 1 to 1,206 in month 3. The second example is from our owned and operated native solution, which would still be considered a native style display solution. And with this particular campaign, we leveraged a true native approach, keeping the user on our site, while providing a strong call to action at the bottom of the article to drive users to the advertiser's website. In this example, we worked with a regional credit union to educate consumers about the value of using credit unions over banks. The metrics included on the right side show both the benchmark data, which is based on data from Nativo, our native ad server, and how this campaign performed against those metrics. And while our CTR was slightly below benchmark, we kept users on the page longer than average and drove a higher percentage of users to the advertiser's website utilizing a strong call to action on the article page. This article was also shared on social channels, resulting in 13% of the total page views coming from earned views. And while there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in creating your first native ad video or post, know that one good ad is not enough. Native advertising often requires multiple approaches. It needs multiple conversations, if you will, with consumers to start to see the results. And this may mean that your first attempt at native advertising is less effective than you'd hope. It's not a sign to give up, however. Just like so many other things in digital marketing, success comes with work. You'll need to gather data, test new approaches, and optimize campaigns accordingly. It's best to enter native ads the same way you do other advertising methods, with a strategic plan for implementation and analysis. If you want to learn more about AdTaxi's native solutions, either native Magellan or our native owned and operated solution, please reach out to your sales rep or to us at info@adtaxi.com, and we'll put you in touch with a sales rep. Thanks so much for your time today. I really hope it was valuable. We'll now open it up for questions. Okay, so there is a question, what is brand lift? So brand lift will end up showing how much more awareness there is of your brand from before a campaign was conducted to after a campaign was conducted. So there are companies out there that do brand lift studies and will survey folks that may or may not have seen your ad to gauge whether there is more awareness about your brand or a particular product or service or some sort of key topic. So those are used with a lot of national advertisers when using native, but also when using a lot of other ad formats as well. All right. Well, if we have no other questions, we will wrap up for this session. Again, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you got a lot out of it, and we will be in touch as we continue to host additional webinars in the future. Thank you.